Hello guys, it's Ryan Ho back with another video. So today let's talk about the best open back headphones you can get. These were, different price, but $190 up to like $450. We have 4 open back headphones, 2 plain magnetic and 2 dynamic. We're going to approach this review with both competitive gaming in mind and as well as music listening. So which one you guys would pick for, just enjoyability factor. And so we'll take an examination of these 4 headphones. So on the left, we have the MM-100. This is a studio headphone essentially. And then over here, we have the FT5. This is an audiophile open back headphone. Like I said, these both are plain magnetic drivers versus these 2 over here are dynamic drivers. And here we have the Fiio FT3, which I just recently reviewed. This one has beryllium coated drivers. So this one has a lot of detail and it has 60mm drivers. So it's a little special. And then we have a HD58x by Sennheiser. This is kind of a headphone that most people should have. So I want to kind of include this in this comparison. So let's kind of compare all 4 and see which one you guys are, would choose and would be interested in. And as always, please like and subscribe down below. Helps my videos out. I'll have links to all these products in the description below. If you guys purchase from those, it helps support my channel. All right, so we have these 4 headphones on the table. So first of all, let's talk about kind of build and comfort. In my opinion, the best built one that I personally like is definitely the MM-100. I think it's just the design of the grills look really cool. I think the overall aesthetic is really nice. But the one I find the most comfortable would probably be this one. The Fiio is definitely the most comfortable for me. It has this nice headband that's really kind of comfortable, and then it also has these kind of nice suede pads, so the pads are also really nice to wear. So I think this one is the most comfortable for me to wear. The Sennheiser is also pretty comfortable, but obviously has a lot more clamp force, and it is the lightest one of the bunch. So I would say these 2 would contend for the most comfortable. And then I would say this one is the one I like better. I just don't like the headband of this because there's only 3 adjustments for the Audeze, which I don't really like. I don't know why they kind of designed it that way. I mean, I guess it's good to be replaceable, but the headband just doesn't, adjust as well as the other ones. But honestly, it is the best looking headphone of the bunch. So that's definitely the one that I would choose. Now, the other thing we talk about is kind of the accessories and stuff. The kind of the Fios right here. So the FT5 and the FT3, both of these come with basically the same accessories. You get the nice box, you get balance cables, swappable cables. Both of these cables, you can literally change the cable from the tip into single inner balance. They come with the XLR, they come with the 1/4 inch. So yeah, they're kind of whooping both of these in accessories for sure. Versus this one at $400, you're only getting a single ended cable. Not to mention this headphone itself is wired differently than every headphone. You can use single ended entry to each side. So it's a little different type of headphone for studio use, but yeah, I would say accessories wise, these 2 are way better, especially with the boxes and everything they come with. Now, build quality wise, I feel like the Audeze and the kind of Fiio FT5, they're very close in my opinion, but I don't know, just the way the grill is, and I think the different color tones on this just looks really nice. But honestly, both of these are built really well, so I wouldn't really kind of pick one over the other. The FT3 is just slightly below, but honestly, it's an all metal build quality. It's literally using the same headband as FT5, so it's honestly just as good. It just looks a little different, honestly. And then this one, it's kind of all plastic, but it is also the cheapest of the bunch, so it kind of makes sense. All right, so let's talk about sound. So going from the cheapest one, we had the classic Sennheiser HD58x Jubilee. This one has this nice sub bass. It has a little bit of roll off because it's an open back as always, and Sennheisers aren't really known for their bass, to be honest. But the bass quality, I would say, is not the best of the bunch. It's definitely the worst of the bunch. And then when it comes to kind of the mid-range, I do think this one does kind of vocals really well. But in the treble, I can definitely hear that it just doesn't have the same resolution as the other headphones. It just doesn't sound like the driver can, move fast enough, in my opinion, to kind of reproduce treble. The FT3, so FT3 is more V-shaped compared to the Sennheiser, which is more, I guess, neutral. And the FT3 definitely has a much better, much more detailed driver compared to the Sennheiser. So this one also has a much bigger driver. As I said, this one has a 60mm while this has a 38mm driver. So the difference in driver size definitely makes a difference. And I've also noticed that, you know, you can see that this has angled drivers, which is also another thing that helps this one. This has angled drivers, so it has better imaging because of that as well. So that's definitely another benefit. And obviously you can see the driver design is really nice, and it's actually really easy to just take off the kind of cups and, you know, replace them. And they also come with replaceable, well, I guess secondary pads as well, but I definitely prefer the velour pads of these ones a little bit more. But yeah, this is a much more fun sounding headphone in comparison to the Sennheiser. This one has just much more bass. The treble is also more emphasized, and it all around sounds way more detailed. However, I do think the Sennheiser in the mids, you know, is just a little bit better versus this is obviously V-shaped, so the mids kind of take a little bit of a back seat. So the vocals might sound a little bit more forward and a little bit more pleasing on the Sennheiser compared to the Fiio, but I think the Fiio still has, you know, more resolution, more detail, and a lot more fun in the low end. So if you want bass and more sub bass, this is definitely the headphone to go for. For me, the FT3 definitely excels the most at imaging. This is probably one of the best imaging headphones I've ever heard. So if you want to play competitive gaming, I was testing in Valorant, and honestly, like when enemies sound like they're in front of you, they're exactly in front of you. You can hear all the footsteps, exactly where they are, pinpoint and very sharp. And I think it just has a good tuning that's really kind of good for FPS gaming, as well as just the kind of angle drivers really just make this excel. This is definitely my #1 recommendation for competitive gaming. I would say this is #2 on the table, and then I would say the Sennheiser would be #3, and I would say FT5 is last for me personally for the best kind of competitive gaming headphone. The kind of Audeze MM-100. So this headphone is obviously $400 versus the FT3 was about $300. So this is a little bit more expensive. I do think that this headphone does something really good, and I think it's the soundstage. I think the soundstage of this thing is pretty ridiculous, especially in comparison to all the headphones on this table. I feel like it is the most open sounding one. It feels like there's just absolutely like no dampening on the back right here. And so it really just sounds like the sounds just kind of fly out there and just like, you know, sound really far away. And then it just sounds like you're in the room as well. With this headphone, I just feel like I could tell where everything is, and I feel like the soundstage is just huge on this. It's the thing that really just like stands out every time I put this headphone on. In comparison to the rest, I just feel like I'm in the room with like the artist or the recording. It's pretty crazy on this headphone. I think it does that the best, and I do think the imaging is also really good on this headphone, but it's definitely not the same degree as the FT3. But I think the soundstage and imaging combined on this headphone makes this headphone really just sound very, very impressive. So I feel like this is the headphone that most kind of classically audiophile people would probably go for. It has that kind of linear type of bass, that very neutral stereo type of sound. So I think, you know, this is definitely the one that the hardcore audiophiles will like the most. And in my opinion, you know, it is the most open sounding big soundstage nerd. I think this one is definitely the one that you'll gravitate towards. The thing I don't like about this headphone, I would say, is that the pads on this is huge, which could be good for some people, but I find my fit of this headphone to be a little bit variable. Like I feel like every time I put it on, it just slightly shifts a little bit. So I wish it either had more clamp force or, you know, the cups were just a little bit smaller, I guess, because I feel like the imaging of this headphone kind of varies depending on how you fit it on your head. So that's something that could be improved. But honestly, when it comes to just the total sound, I think it does it really well. I think it's very clean. The separation is really good. You can hear the sub bass on this headphone too. So for an open back headphone, this one digs really deep. So that's a really good thing. But you have to keep in mind that this headphone also has, well, flat bass. So you're not getting an elevated bass in that sense. So you'll hear the bass, but it's not going to be like a crazy kind of, you know, bass head experience, right? But the mid-range on this headphone is really good. However, I do notice something about this headphone. I noticed that the mid-range is actually what people call slightly nasally. I've been noticing that when I was doing this comparison of this headphone to the kind of FT5. So it's kind of an interesting discussion that even though this is a studio headphone, I feel like the FT5 almost has better mid-range and treble than this headphone. This headphone sounds a little nasally in the mid-range, and then the treble is definitely rolled off, versus the FT5, it has maybe a little less air in this headphone, but it definitely has more even mid-range, and the treble is even more kind of more neutral versus this is, I would say, a little bit underemphasized. And so I find that like when I'm listening to music, especially vocals and stuff, I do like it a lot on the Fiio. It just sounds a little bit more consistent and a little bit better in some cases. But it just depends on like the kind of singer and which area they're singing. I feel like maybe female vocals are slightly bit better on this one versus male vocals are better on the FT5. But it's an interesting discussion for sure. And I would also say when it comes to kind of the bass, right, the FT5 has elevated bass that just like is really, really fun. You definitely hear the bass kind of slam on this thing, and it's much more enjoyable versus, this one's more like a studio, more neutral type of sound, right? So the FT5 in general, I would definitely call it a warm headphone. So the bass is definitely emphasized a lot, and that's what gives it kind of that fun quality. But it also has really good quality bass and digs deep. So in comparison to like the FT3, the FT3 also digs deep, but it doesn't have the same quality of bass as the FT5. The FT5 definitely has the best quality bass. You definitely hear that sub bass a lot more kind of, I guess, defined in comparison to the FT3. Then moving on through the mid-range, I do think this pretty much has almost the best mid-range of the bunch. I feel like it's between this one and the Sennheiser HD58x. I think they kind of compete in around that kind of area, but I do think that this headphone plus this headphone just have way more, the players just have way more detail in comparison to the Sennheiser. It just really doesn't match, and it's not really that close, honestly. Like, you could definitely hear the difference between. I do think the FT5 is definitely the winner in the mid-range for me. And then when it comes to the treble, honestly, I actually think I like the Fiio treble the most right here too on the FT5. It is the most like neutral, you can hear it. And it doesn't have any like characteristic of being like a little bit more kind of sharp sounding. I feel like sometimes on the FT3 you can definitely hear the sharp sound. So the FT3 definitely has a little bit of overemphasis versus the kind of Audeze is just underemphasized, and then the one on the 58X just honestly just doesn't sound that clear because I don't think the driver can reproduce treble that well, in my opinion. So that is kind of how I view the headphones in general. So the conclusion really is like, which one is the best, right? For you, for me. Personally, the way I see it is the Sennheiser is good if you want a starter headphone. I mean, the price is pretty good. I do think the vocal kind of for male, female, they do seem more consistent, I guess, overall. It's pretty even, but I feel like the treble does kind of lack a little bit for me on this headphone. And then the sub bass is also, and the bass quality isn't that good. So for me, this is definitely the kind of more affordable option. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, this is still a good option. I would say this is probably the best for competitive gamers. I think the gamers who want really good imaging will really like this. People who like a lot more bass will also like this more. My personal pick is the FT5 over the FT3. I think the FT5 has more bass, better quality of sub bass and bass, as well as the treble I think is a little bit more, I guess, refined. It doesn't have a little bit of that overemphasis I hear on the FT3. This one is just more classically neutral. And I feel like the whole entire tuning is just a little bit more to my style. So I think the FT5 overall is better. I mean, it is more expensive at, 50% more at $450 versus this is $300. But between these two, I would definitely pick the FT5. However, this one isn't very good at like competitive gaming versus this one is very, very excellent. So that's why I'm thinking like this is definitely the best for the gamers. We have the MM-100. I think the MM-100 is really going to be for the more traditional audiophile people who want that very clean type of sound and who really like soundstage. I think this is definitely the most impressive in that aspect. Honestly, it's definitely even better than the FT5 in the soundstage aspect. But I feel like when I'm listening to headphones and based purely off of just enjoyability, I would say just the tuning and, the actual me just enjoying the music, I enjoy a lot more on the FT5 in comparison to MM-100. So for me, personally, I think the FT5 is my choice among these four headphones. But I do think that a lot of people will be debating between these two. And, if you like a little bit more neutral type of sound, like I said, you're definitely going to aim for this one. But if you're just, wanting to enjoy your music, then I do think the FT5 is a little bit better. Overall, I feel like this headphone just sounds more cohesive. The soundstage is still pretty good. Maybe not as wide as this one, but definitely just as tall. And I just like the tuning of the mid-range too. The vocals just sound very good on this. Maybe the upper mid-range is a little bit stepped back, but overall it just has a nice mid-range, nice treble, and then definitely a boosted bass. And I just really think this headphone is just that enjoyable for me to listen to. So I hope that helps you guys make your decisions. Obviously, all four of these headphones are good headphones in their own right. I would say these three are clearly better than the Sennheiser. The Sennheiser is a little bit, less detailed than these. So if you guys are interested in the kind of, more premium options. Anyways, I hope that helped you guys. Please like and subscribe down below. Helps my videos out. And I'll see you guys in the next video.